the desert was quiet. Until it wasn't. It's July 1947 in New Mexico. No streetlights, no cell phones, just wind, sand, and the kind of darkness that feels like it's hiding something. A rancher rides out after a storm and finds debris scattered across the ground, lightweight, metallic, strange, not like anything he's ever
He
seen.
brings it in.
And then the U.S. Army does something that still makes people's blood run cold.
They announce they've recovered a flying disc.
For a few hours, it's official. The headlines explode. The world tilts.
And then almost immediately the story changes.
Now it's a weather balloon. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Same debris, same night, same base.
Two completely different realities. So what happened out there near Roswell? Was it an honest mistake? Or a panic-fueled cover story? A secret Cold War project? Or something that wasn't supposed to be on this earth at all?
Tonight, we're opening the Roswell case file timeline, witnesses, government memos, and the questions that never went away, because whether you believe in aliens or not, Roswell is the moment America learned a hard lesson.
Sometimes the official story isn't the whole story.
It really is. I mean, you can draw a straight line from that moment to, almost all modern conspiracy culture. It's the absolute patient zero of the truth is out there.
It totally is. And before we get completely lost in the high desert, just a quick reminder to you listening, if you're enjoying these deep dives, please do make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us keep the lights on and, keep the files open.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so Roswell, the granddaddy, the big one.
The one that really started it all, yeah.
I feel like we've circled this for ages. We've talked about events that came after it, but we've never just sat down and really unpacked the core documents themselves. And that's the plan today, right?
Yeah, this is the mission.
We aren't just looking at the movies or the lore or the alien jerky they sell in town. We were actually looking at the United States Air Force reports.
Yeah.
The ones that came out in the 90s.
That's right. And I think that's a really important distinction to make right up front. Our goal today isn't to, speculate wildly or try to prove aliens exist.
Right.
It's to look at the official explanation. The documents the government itself released when Congress basically forced their hand. And then compare that to the myth that has grown up around it for, almost 80 years now.
And see where they line up or where they don't.
Exactly. Where do they overlap? Where do they completely diverge? And maybe ask why the government felt the need to write, it's nearly 1,000 pages of reports on a quote-unquote weather balloon 50 years after the fact.
Which just on its own is a little suspicious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to even begin to understand those reports, we have to reset our clocks. We need to go back to 1947.
We really do. And we need to set the scene properly, because 1947 isn't just, black and white TVs and sock hops. The general feeling, the vibe in the country was incredibly tense.
This is post-war.
Immediately post-war. You have to remember, World War II has just ended. The dust has barely settled in Europe and Japan. But the Cold War is already in its infancy, and the fear. The fear is palpable.
The U.S. is the only country with the atomic bomb at this point, correct?
For a very, very short window, yes. But the military brass, the government, they are terrified, absolutely terrified that the Soviets are going to get it.
Oh, that they already have it.
Or that they already have it, or that they're going to send their own bombers over the pole to attack the U.S. mainland. So the entire defense apparatus is on this hair trigger alert.
So everyone is looking up at the sky.
Everyone is looking up. The atmosphere is paranoid. And then into that paranoia, you get the spark. Just a few weeks before anything happened in Roswell, on June 24th, 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold is flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state.
Okay.
And he reports seeing 9 objects flying in formation at, just incredible speeds. He calculates it at something like 1,700 miles an hour, which in 1947 was just impossible.
And this is the famous sighting, the one that coined the term flying saucer, isn't it?
It is, but it's kind of a misunderstanding. Arnold actually described the object's movement as being like a saucer skipping across water.
Oh, not the shape.
Not the shape. He said the craft themselves were shaped more like crescents or boomerangs. But the press, they grabbed onto that one word, saucer. The headline became flying saucers, and bam. Suddenly, the public had a very specific image in their heads.
And once that image was out there, it just triggered a complete mania.
A massive, massive wave of sightings. We are talking hundreds of reports flooding in from all over the country. In late June and early July of 47, people are seeing things everywhere. Pilots, police officers, regular people in their backyards.
So Roswell doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all. We are talking about a spark landing in a literal barrel of gasoline. The whole country was already completely obsessing over strange things in the sky.
Okay, so high tension, nuclear anxiety, everyone is already seeing saucers in their sleep. And then in early July, out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, something actually crashes.
And that brings us to Section 1, the incident itself. It's early July 1947. We are on the Foster Ranch, which is about 75 miles northwest of the town of Roswell.
And this isn't like just down the street from the Army base. This is remote. Seriously remote.
Very remote. Rugged, high desert terrain. You're not just stumbling upon it. And we have our protagonist, a man named W.W. Bruzel, but everyone called him Mac.
Mac Breesel. He's the ranch foreman.
Right. And there's a massive thunderstorm the night before. I mean, the reports describe booming thunder, lightning everywhere, the whole works. So the next day, Mac rides out on his horse to check on the sheep, check the fences, and he finds a mess.
He finds the debris field.
He finds the debris field. And it is absolutely crucial. I mean, if you take nothing else away from this deep dive, lock this in to focus on what Bruzel actually described finding at the time.
Not what people claimed he found 30 years later.
Exactly. Not the legend, the original report. In 1947, Bruzel describes a huge area scattered with, and I'm quoting here, rubber strips, tinfoil, tough paper, sticks, and tape with flowers printed on it.
Sticks and tape with flowers. That sounds, well, surprisingly mundane, almost childish.
It sounds like trash. It sounds like a kite exploded. In fact, Bruzel himself didn't think much of it at first. He just sort of kicked it around, gathered some of it up, and then ignored it for a few days.
So he didn't immediately think alien spaceship.
Not even close. Yeah. It wasn't until he went into town, first to Corona and then to Roswell, and he heard people whispering about these flying discs that Kenneth Arnold had seen, and he heard there might be a reward for finding one.
Ah, the reward. That's always a motivator.
Right. That's when the light bulb went on. He thought, hey, maybe that pile of junk on the ranch is one of those things.
So the idea that it was a disc really came from the news cycle, not from the actual shape of what he found on the ground.
That's a key point. He found a field of scraps. He heard the word disc in town. He connected the two. So he scoops some of the material up, the strange foil, the rubber, a stick or two, and he heads into Roswell.
And he goes to the sheriff.
He goes to Sheriff George Wilcox. And you can imagine Wilcox, a small-town sheriff, probably thinking, I do not get paid enough for this. A rancher comes in with a box of weird foil and sticks talking about flying discs.
So what does he do?
He does the logical thing. He calls the nearby Roswell Army Air Field, or RAAF.
Okay, and this is where the plot really thickens. Because RAAF isn't just any old airbase.
No, not at all. RAAF was the home of the 509th Bomb Group.
And the 509th was?
The only atomic bomb group in the entire world. These were the elite of the elite. These are the guys who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If anyone on Earth should know what a conventional aircraft or a secret aircraft looks like, it's these guys.
You would think.
So they send out the base intelligence officer, a major named Jesse Marcel, and they also send a counterintelligence corps officer, Sheridan Cavett, to go with him out to the ranch.
So you've got the top intelligence guys from the world's only nuclear base heading out to a sheep ranch.
That's the scene. So Marcel and Cavett go out, they meet Bruzel, they see the debris field, and by all accounts, it's a huge area. They collect a bunch of this stuff, the foil, the rubber, the sticks, they load it into their vehicles. And Major Marcel even famously stops at his own house on the way back to the base.
To show his family?
To show his wife and his young son, Jesse Marcel Jr., the weird medal he found. He wakes them up in the middle of the night to show them pieces of a supposed flying saucer.
That part of the story becomes really important later on, doesn't it?
It becomes central to the whole myth, but then comes the press release.
The absolute smoking gun, July 8, 1947. I still, to this day, cannot believe this actually happened. The public information officer at the base, a man named Walter Hott, issues an official press release.
On military letterhead.
On military letterhead. And he doesn't mince words, does he? He says the RAAF has captured a flying saucer.
It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't unidentified debris. It wasn't a possible weather device. It was a flying saucer. It went out on the Associated Press wires. It was the front page headline in the Roswell Daily Record. RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region.
Just imagine. Imagine reading that over your morning coffee in 1947. The military admitted it. It's real.
For a few hours, it was. And that is the absolute core of the entire controversy right there. Why would an elite atomic bomb group, the most high-tech, secretive unit in the world, say they found a flying saucer if all they found was a bunch of sticks and foil?
It makes no sense.
Was it incompetence? Was it just excitement that got out of hand? Or, as the Air Force would claim decades later, was it a deliberate distraction?
Because the party, the celebration, didn't last very long.
Not at all. The story traveled up the chain of command fast. It reached General Roger Ramey, the commander of the 8th Air Force stationed in Fort Worth, Texas.
So Marcel's boss's boss.
Way up the chain. And Ramey is reportedly furious. He orders the debris and Major Marcel himself to be flown to Fort Worth immediately, no stops.
And the very next day, July 9th, the retraction hits the papers.
Hard. General Ramey holds a press conference in his office. He has the debris, or what he says is the debris, spread out on the floor. He's got photographers there from the local papers. And Ramey says, "Folks, it was all a big mistake."
A mistake.
He says his guys in Roswell got a little overexcited. He identifies the material as a RAWIN target. That's RAWIN. It's a radar wind target that's used with weather balloons to track wind speeds at high altitudes.
And he shows off the debris.
He shows off tinfoil, some balsa wood sticks, scraps of rubber. It looks exactly like what you'd expect from a weather balloon.
And then there's that famous photo, the one of Major Marcel crouching next to this mundane-looking debris, holding a piece of foil, and he looks... well, he does not look happy.
He looks like a man who is being profoundly humiliated. He looks like he's just been dressed down by a general and told to shut up and smile for the camera.
So officially, on July 9th, 1947, the flying saucer from another world became a humble weather balloon. And the story just died.
It completely evaporated. It became a non-story, a local joke. For 30 years, Roswell wasn't a thing. It wasn't in the history books. It wasn't even in the Air Force's famous Project Blue Book files on UFOs. It was just chalked up as a goofy mistake from that crazy flying saucer summer of 1947.
Until the late 1970s. And this is where we get into Section 2, the resurrection. How does a story that has been dead and buried for 3 decades come back to life with such a vengeance?
It really starts with one person, a nuclear physicist and UFO researcher named Stanton Friedman. In 1978, he's digging around looking for old UFO cases, and he gets a tip to talk to a guy named Jesse Marcel.
Our Major Marcel. Guy from the photo.
The very same. But now he's retired, he's a civilian, he's much older, and he's apparently ready to talk.
And I'm guessing he doesn't stick to the weather balloon script this time?
Not even a little bit. Marcel tells Friedman that the weather balloon explanation was a complete lie. It was a cover-up. He claims that the debris in that famous photo in General Ramey's office, the stuff they showed the press, was a plant. It had been switched.
The old beaten switch.
Exactly. Marcel claimed the real material he found on that ranch was, and this is his famous quote, "not of this earth."
And this is where the exotic properties start coming in.
Oh, yeah. He described foil that you could crumple into a tight ball, and when you opened your hand, it would uncrumple itself instantly, without a single wrinkle or crease. He talked about memory metal.
The indestructible beams, too.
Right. These small I-beams that you supposedly couldn't bend or dent with a sledgehammer, yet they were as light as a feather.
And just like that, the myth isn't just back, it's supercharged.
And it just grows and grows. From 1980, when the first big book on the subject, The Roswell Incident, was published, to the early 90s, the story just mutated. It went from being about a pile of strange debris to, well, to everything else.
We start hearing about second crash sites, right?
Yeah, correct. Suddenly, one debris field wasn't enough. People started coming forward, claiming there was a second site, the impact site, maybe even a third. And more importantly, the debris wasn't enough anymore. The whole narrative shifted to focus on alien bodies.
This is where it gets really dark and, frankly, a lot more compelling for the public.
And way more complex. You have all these new witnesses coming out of the woodwork, people like Glenn Dennis, who was a local mortician in Roswell. In 1989, that's over 40 years after the event, he comes forward with this incredible story.
What was his claim?
He claimed that back in July 47, he got a call from the base mortuary officer asking about how to preserve bodies that had been exposed to the elements and asking about child-sized caskets.
Child-sized caskets.
Yeah. And then he says he went to the base hospital and a nurse he knew, in a frantic state, told him about seeing these small non-human bodies with giant heads being autopsied by the base doctors.
The classic gray alien image. Large head, small body.
Exactly. And then you have the infamous alien autopsy film that surfaces in the 90s. The story just kept absorbing these new, more dramatic elements. It became this grand unified theory of UFOs.
And it reached a point where the political pressure became too intense to ignore. It wasn't just fringe researchers anymore. You had a sitting U.S. congressman getting involved.
That's right. Stephen Schiff, a congressman from New Mexico. His constituents were coming to him demanding answers. So he started asking official questions in the early 90s. He went to the General Accounting Office, the GAO, which is basically Congress's investigative arm, and said, "Find me the records for this incident."
He wanted to know if the government was hiding something. Plain and simple.
And the GAO came back and said, "We can't find anything." They reported that the administrative and outgoing message records from the Roswell Army Air Field for that specific time period were missing, potentially destroyed.
Which, of course, looks incredibly suspicious.
The dog ate my homework just doesn't fly when you're the U.S. military talking about the records of your only nuclear bomb wing.
It's the worst possible excuse.
Precisely. So to answer the GAO and to respond to Congressman Schiff, the Air Force was forced to conduct a massive, exhaustive search of their own archives. They declassified everything they could find related to balloons, crashes, and anything else in New Mexico from that era. And that brings us to the first of the two major government responses, the 1994 report.
Okay, Section 3, the 1994 Air Force report.
Huh.
And this is the moment where the Air Force finally, after almost 50 years, admits, okay, we lied.
Yes. The headline finding of that report was the admission that the weather balloon story from 1947 was, in fact, a cover story.
Which is a huge admission.
Yeah.
But they didn't say it was to cover up aliens.
No. They said the lie was to cover up a top-secret, high-altitude surveillance project called Project Mogul.
Okay, so let's unpack Mogul. What was it? What was so secret about it?
Well, you have to go back to the context we talked about, the intense fear of Soviet nukes. Mogul was a highly classified project designed to spy on Soviet nuclear tests from a huge distance.
We didn't have spy satellites yet.
Exactly. They were using a newly discovered phenomenon. Scientists had found there's a specific layer in the upper atmosphere, a sound channel, where low-frequency sound waves can travel for thousands and thousands of miles with very little signal loss.
So they were trying to listen for the boom of a distant atomic bomb test.
That's precisely it. They were trying to use the sky as a giant microphone. The idea was to fly massive trains of high-altitude balloons equipped with these extremely sensitive, low-frequency acoustic microphones. If the Soviets detonated a bomb in Kazakhstan, these balloons flying over New Mexico might just hear the acoustic shockwave as it traveled through that channel.
That's actually brilliant. But okay, so it's a spy balloon.
Well,
A very clever one. But how does that explain what Brazel found? How does it explain the flying disc?
this is the fascinating part where the really mundane details seem to solve the mystery. A Mogul balloon wasn't just one balloon, it was a train. A long string of equipment, sometimes up to 600 feet long.
600 feet.
Yeah. It had multiple neoprene weather balloons for lift, it had the acoustic sensors, and crucially, it had radar targets.
Radar targets. These are the kite-looking things we see in diagrams.
Exactly. They needed to track these balloon trains with radar, but the balloons themselves are basically rubber, which doesn't show up well on radar. So they attached these multifaceted geometric structures made of balsa wood and foil to the train. They were designed to be really good at reflecting radar waves.
Balsa wood and foil. And rubber strips from the balloons.
Yeah.
That matches exactly what Mac Brazel said he found.
It matches perfectly. The materials list is a one-to-one match. But here is the real aha moment. The detail that, for me, really seems to seal the deal on the debris question. Remember how Major Marcel's son, and later Marcel himself, talked about finding strange alien hieroglyphics on the debris?
Yeah, the little purple symbols on the I-beams or sticks.
Well, the Air Force report tracked down the source of those symbols. The radar targets for Project Mogul were being manufactured by a toy company in New York.
A toy company?
A toy company. And during the war, and right after, materials were scarce. To reinforce the balsa wood sticks that made up the frame of these radar targets, the toy company workers used whatever adhesive tape they had lying around the factory.
Oh, no, don't tell me.
They used decorative tape, Scotch tape that had little pink and purple flowers and geometric, almost abstract designs printed on it.
You're kidding me.
I am not. The alien language that witnesses described for decades was flower patterns on tape from a toy factory.
That is, I mean, if that's true, that is the most incredible anticlimactic explanation in history. But it fits the description so specifically.
It matches the color, purple, it matches the geometric description, and it explains why this material would look so bizarre to a rancher in 1947. He's never seen a radar target before. He's never seen tape with purple flowers on it. It would look alien.
Okay, so if it was just this Mogul balloon train, why the massive cover-up? Why did General Ramey have to lie and call it a weather balloon?
Because Project Mogul was classified Priority 1A top secret, it was one of the nation's highest priority intelligence programs at the time. The U.S. government absolutely, under no circumstances, wanted the Soviets to know we were developing a technology to listen in on their nuclear tests.
So revealing its existence would have been a massive intelligence breach.
Massive. If General Ramey had held that press conference and said, "Oh, sorry for the confusion, that's just our top secret acoustic spy device for listening to Russia," he would have been court-martialed on the spot.
So the weather balloon story was just a convenient lie. The perfect cover.
It was the perfect cover. It explained the materials, foil, sticks, rubber, and it was boring. No one asked follow-up questions about a weather balloon. It just kills the story. The irony is, the guys on the ground in Roswell, Major Marcel and his crew at the 509th, they probably didn't know about Mogul.
They were the bombers, not the skies.
Yeah. Right. It was a completely different program on a strict need-to-know basis. So they see this weird, lightweight foil, this strange tape with symbols, the sheer amount of rubber from a 600-foot train, and they panicked. They thought, we've never seen anything like this. It must be one of those discs.
And the Air Force report even managed to pinpoint the specific Mogul flight.
They did. They interviewed a man named Professor Charles B. Moore, who was actually one of the original engineers on Project Mogul back in the 40s. He was still alive in the 90s. And he confirmed that Mogul Flight Number 4 was launched on June 4th, 1947.
The date lines up perfectly with when Brazil would have found it.
Perfectly. And Professor Moore confirmed that they lost contact with Flight 4. The last time it was tracked on radar, it was floating over the area right near, you guessed it, the Foster Ranch.
Okay, so the 1994 report, it really does seem to wrap up the debris question in a neat bow. Foil, sticks, tape, rubber, it was a spy balloon. Case closed on the flying disc. But that still doesn't explain the bodies.
And that is exactly why the Air Force had to release a second, even more detailed report 3 years later.
Which brings us to Section 4. The 1997 report. This one was actually titled the Roswell Report. Case closed.
A little presumptuous, maybe, but yeah. The 1994 report actually generated more anger in the UFO community because it completely ignored the issue of the alien bodies. People said, fine, okay, maybe the foil was Mogul. We don't believe you, but maybe. But what about the little gray men?
You can't just ignore the biggest part of the myth.
Exactly. So the Air Force went back to the archives again. And their conclusion in this 1997 report was basically a psychological one. They argued that Roswell, as we know it, the myth with the bodies, is a product of a phenomenon they called time compression.
Time compression. What does that mean in this context?
It means that witnesses were taking memories of real events, events that actually happened but in the 1950s, and subconsciously moving them backward in time to 1947 to make them fit the Roswell narrative.
So they genuinely saw something real, but they're just remembering when it happened completely wrong.
That's the argument. Let's start with the alien bodies. The Air Force report details several high-altitude research programs from the 50s, specifically Project High Dive and Project Excelsior.
These were the early space program tests with the parachutes.
Exactly. They were testing high-altitude parachutes and early pressurized suits for pilots and future astronauts. And to do this, they dropped anthropomorphic dummies from massive balloons at incredible heights, well over 100,000 feet.
Anthropomorphic dummies. Crash test dummies, basically.
Pretty much. Now, what did these dummies look like? Imagine a standard crash test dummy. They were human-sized, they had bald heads, they had no ears, and they were covered in a grayish skin made of canvas or plastic.
Okay, that is starting to sound very familiar.
It's the classic description. And here's the ticker. When these expensive dummies landed out in the New Mexico desert, the Air Force had to go recover them. They would send out a recovery convoy with cranes, medical personnel on standby, and stretchers. And because the dummies were full of sensitive instruments, they would often wrap them in these white or silver insulating bags to protect them from the desert heat.
So, body bags.
Effectively, yes. So put yourself in the shoes of a rancher or a civilian in, say, 1954, 1956. You're out in the desert. You see a military convoy cordoning off an area. You see them lifting these small gray, bald, human-shaped figures onto stretchers and sealing them into bags.
You would absolutely think you were seeing the military recovering strange body.
You absolutely would. And the Air Force's argument is that 30 or 40 years later, when a UFO researcher comes to you and asks, hey, did you ever see anything strange out in the desert back in the old days? You remember that. But your memory over time has conflated it with the famous 1947 flying saucer story you've heard a million times on TV.
That actually makes a frightening amount of sense. Human memory is a tricky, unreliable thing.
It is profoundly unreliable. But that doesn't explain the burned bodies or the autopsy at the hospital.
Right. The Glenn Dennis story. The frantic nurse. The smell of death at the base hospital.
For that part of the story, the Air Force points to actual, documented, and horrific accidents. Specifically, a KC-97 Stratofreighter aircraft that crashed in 1956.
1956. Again, that's 9 years after the Roswell incident.
Yes, but look at the details. A KC-97, a large military transport plane, crashed on a mountain near the base. 11 airmen died. Their bodies were badly burned in the fire. They were recovered by the military and brought to the local hospital in Roswell for identification and autopsy.
So there were burned bodies at the base hospital. There was a bad smell. There were autopsies.
Yes. All of that is documented fact from 1956. And when it comes to Glenn Dennis, the mortician in the Air Force report really takes his testimony apart. Dennis claimed he saw a specific nurse at the hospital in 1947 who told him the story. The Air Force searched every single personnel file from that era. They said no nurse matching her name or description existed at the base in 1947.
But maybe she was there in 56 during the real crash.
Or maybe he was remembering a different nurse entirely.
Yeah.
Dennis also mentioned a pediatrician he was friends with at the hospital who was supposedly involved. Well, official records show that that specific pediatrician didn't even arrive at the base until 1951.
So his timeline is all over the place. The people he names weren't there when he says they were.
The Air Force's conclusion is that Glenn Dennis, like so many others, took real, probably traumatic memories of the 1956 plane crash, where he might have actually been called in to help as a mortician, and mashed them up with the 1947 folklore he'd heard later in life.
It's the time compression theory again. You have the Mogul debris from 1947. You have the test dummies being dropped all through the 1950s. And you have the tragic plane crash with burned bodies from 1956.
And over decades of retelling, of watching TV shows, of being interviewed, these separate, real ingredients get cooked into one single, coherent, but fictional stew called the Roswell incident.
Which brings us to Section 5, the critical analysis. Because let's be honest, the UFO community did not stand up and applaud this report when it came out.
Not even a polite golf clap. They absolutely hated it. They argued that the dummies' explanation was condescending and insulting. They pointed out the obvious flaw. Dummies dropped in 1954 cannot explain an event that happened in 1947.
The basic argument being, you think we're that stupid. We know the difference between 47 and 54.
That was the exact sentiment. Stanton Friedman called it a masterpiece of propaganda. The pro-UFO side just doubled down. They argued that Mogul was just another layer of the onion, another more sophisticated cover-up to hide the real truth.
But from a purely psychological, a scientific perspective, is the Air Force's time compression argument sound? Is that a real thing?
No, it is absolutely a real documented psychological phenomenon. We know for a fact that human memory is incredibly malleable. It's not a video recording that you just play back. It's a reconstruction. Every single time you remember an event, you are actively rewriting it in your brain, influenced by your current beliefs, by new information, by suggestion.
So after 40 years, especially influenced by movies and books and interviewers asking leading questions, it would be very easy to transpose dates.
Especially if you don't keep a diary. If your only record is just a vague memory of that time I saw the military picking up those weird gray bodies, that memory doesn't come with a digital timestamp. The year 1956 can easily slide back to 1947 to fit a more exciting story.
And what about the witness pool in general? We hear about hundreds of witnesses.
But you have to break them down. How many of them were actually there on the day, firsthand?
Very, very few.
Mac Brazel is the main one. And his original story in 1947 was about trash, debris. The people who saw bodies, or the ship, almost always appear in the narrative much later, in the 80s and 90s. And often their stories are secondhand or thirdhand. My dad's friend told me, or a nurse who later disappeared told me.
And we really can't ignore the role of pop culture in shaping those later memories.
It's a huge factor. In 1989, the TV show Unsolved Mysteries did a massive dramatic segment on Roswell. They had reenactments, they showed the crash saucer, they showed the alien bodies on gurneys. Millions and millions of people watched that.
And suddenly, everyone in New Mexico remembers seeing something just like that back in the day.
It creates a feedback loop. The myth, as portrayed on TV, informs the memory. And then the newly remembered memory is used as evidence to reinforce the myth. It becomes self-perpetuating.
So let's move to Section 6, the conclusion. Let's try to synthesize this official story. If we take the two Air Force reports at face value, what actually happened out there in the desert?
Okay, here is the official timeline according to the government files we have.
In June of 1947, the top-secret Project Mogul Flight 4 is launched to try and spy on the Soviets. The balloon train fails and crashes on the Foster Ranch.
2. In early July, Mac Brazel finds the debris field. It's foil, sticks, rubber, and tape with flowers on it.
3. Major Marcel and the 509th go out. They don't recognize the classified Mogul gear. They're already on high alert because of the national flying saucer craze. They make a bad call, and their PIO issues a press release saying they found a disc.
4. General Ramey in Fort Worth steps in. He knows, or is quickly told by Washington, that this is a highly sensitive project. He has to kill the story immediately, so he uses the convenient and boring weather balloon lie as cover, and it works perfectly.
5. Through the 1950s, the Air Force is dropping test dummies all over the same deserts. And in 1956, a tragic KC-97 plane crash occurs, with burned casualties being brought to the Roswell Hospital.
And finally, 6. From 1978 through the 1990s, researchers interview aging witnesses. These witnesses, with fallible human memories, conflate the debris story of 47 with the very real dummies and crashes they saw in the 50s. The modern myth of Roswell is born from this jumble of memories.
It's a chain of events, a mundane beginning, a necessary lie, and then a swirl of unrelated memories that stick to it over the years.
It fits. It's logical. It explains the physical evidence. It explains the witness testimony, but it still lacks something, doesn't it?
It lacks the romance, and more importantly, it lacks the trust.
That's the key, isn't it? The emotional truth of Roswell.
Absolutely. Why does this story persist? Why, even after these incredibly detailed reports, do millions of people still believe it was aliens? Because the government admitted they lied.
They lied in 1947. That's a fact.
It's an undisputed fact. They told the public it was a weather balloon. It wasn't. It was a top-secret spy balloon. When you catch an institution in a lie, even if they later come back and tell you the truth, okay, it wasn't aliens, it was actually this other secret thing, you have fundamentally broken the bond of trust.
Once you lie to me about the weather balloon, why on earth should I believe you about the test dummies?
Precisely. The cover-up of Project Mogul, which was necessary from a national security standpoint at the time, created a vacuum of truth. And into that vacuum, the public poured all their Cold War fears, their hopes for the future, and their collective imaginations. They filled that vacuum with aliens because the government refused to tell them what was really there.
And let's be honest, it's just a better story. The idea that we are not alone, that the government has this incredible secret history hidden in a hangar somewhere, it's so much more compelling than balsa wood and tape with flowers on it.
It is. It's the ultimate modern folklore. It perfectly reflects our deep, ingrained distrust of authority and maybe, our cosmic loneliness.
So we've walked through the memos, the radar targets, the dummies, and the conflicting compressed memories. The Air Force says case closed. The true believers say cover up. But here is the final thought to keep you up tonight. The government admitted they lied to the public in 1947 to protect a secret project. They admitted they used weather balloons as a convenient lie. If Project Mogul hadn't been declassified, if those files had been lost or permanently destroyed, the weather balloon would still be the official truth today. It makes you wonder what other weather balloons are out there right now, floating over our heads, protecting secrets we won't learn about for another 50 years.
That is the question, isn't it?
See you in the next Deep Dive.